Welcome back to Jump Scare. I'm Betty B. Dudley.
And I'm Shad Youngblood.
Today we're going to be discussing Swamp Thing and the return of Swamp Thing.
Yes.
One of Shad's favorite things. And yes, technically it's not horror, since the first one was directed and co-written by Wes Craven.
Yes.
We're going to be discussing that. And then we thought it'd just be fun to just switch things up and then talk about Return of Swamp Thing because we just watched the Blu-ray of it.
Yeah.
Thoughts, Shad? We know Shad really enjoys it. He's read probably all of the comics and owns a large amount of them.
Yes.
I, as myself as a kid, I never really knew per se that it was a comic when I first saw it on TV. It was just one of those things that, they would show like on a Saturday midday. Usually the movies that I really enjoyed when I was younger were movies that would fall like it was like rainy outside or I decided to stay in. And I would just watch whatever movie was happening on like the WB or, whatever channel I would happen to be watching. And there were all those campy ass movies. And this movie, even though I do love Swamp Thing, is super effing campy.
Yeah, that's the problem with it. And I enjoyed the original movie that Wes Craven did a lot because I saw it when I was a kid. And at the time, there weren't a whole lot of comic adaptations going on. Like there hadn't been a Batman movie yet that was any good, and all you'd had was the Superman movies, and that was kind of mixed depending on which one you saw. So it was good when you saw Swamp Thing, and it was like at the time Craven's Swamp Thing movie is pretty close to what the comics were like. It was mostly just Swamp Thing turned into it's Alec Holland turned into a monster. He's fighting different monsters in the swamp, or when they ran out of monsters and it was robots he was fighting in the swamp, or and it was pretty close to it. And Craven had apparently always liked the comics and then wanted to adapt it. So
you could see that, and it's 1982, and that's first Craven's first sci-fi film.
Yeah, kind of sci-fi with elements of horror and that kind of stuff in it. And like I said, Craven at this point was 82. He hadn't done Nightmare on Elm Street yet, so he wasn't really. He was
established horror.
Yeah, he had done like Last House on the Left and The Hills Have Eyes, but they were still kind of like cultish, underground. Mm-hmm. There was a drive-in type things. He hadn't had the big breakout hit yet, and then Swamp Thing wasn't really a hit either. So,
and then weird coincidental horror connection. Harry Mandolfini did the score, and he also did the Friday the 13th series.
Yeah.
So, and you do hear some of those elements. Composers usually have certain keys that you'll hear, like Danny Elfman. You can tell Danny Elfman from fucking mile away.
Yeah.
His stuff is just so well known because he uses a lot of it over and over again. So that was a cool little 360 of horror, or 180.
Yeah, and it was good to see Adrienne Barbeau in it, and because she's done a few horror things. And
has she?
Yeah, nuts.
Oh, okay. Crazy.
And considering a movie that was in the early 80s, they did a pretty good job of not making her character kind of always the damsel in distress. There's a great scene where things are going wrong and she just punches a guy out, takes his assault rifle, and starts killing people.
Yeah, the 80s was the beginnings, especially this is early 80s, so it's the stirrings of the working woman. Women were starting to do more things. They're starting to be more, prevalent in the workforce. So, depending on the films you were watching, you saw women empowering themselves. And then we had Alien, already had come out by this point. So we have that strong woman to go after. And Adrienne Barbeau, even though I know we're talking about yay woman, and they were she was doing kick-ass thing in the movie, I have to say that there's a lot of missed boob shots that didn't make it. And they did make it to the finale, restored film.
Yeah, there's a European version where there's a scene towards the end where the Arcane character is leaving. There's an orgy going on that he walks through, and those are only on. I think they might be on some of the DVDs that came out years ago, and they're on some of the VHSs as well, which is weird because they don't change the rating. It's still rated PG, but it's, you know, you just at the end of it's like, oh, I don't remember this naked orgy when I saw this when I was a kid. It seemed like that would have stuck with me.
Yeah, I guess maybe because it's like not taboo like it is over here, so that's just like, that's PG-13. We see that every day when we go to the kitchen. Just as like, you know, everyday ordinary thing. Orgies are happening.
Well, this one was out even before the PG-13 existed, so it was just G, PG, or R.
Wow, interesting.
Because they didn't start the PG-13 until Gremlins and Raiders or Temple of Doom.
Yeah, well, there's more boob shots. I guess what happened, they mistakenly put on the DVD the the theatrical, the one that shows like more boob shots of like her side boob and stuff. And then people were complaining because they were supposed to put the TV version, and they actually put the wrong version on DVD, and then it was like a big recall.
That's why those others are hard to find. That's why it took a while for anybody to put it out on Blu-ray.
I'm like, it's just a side boob, guys. It's not the like Spanish Inquisition. It's not that serious.
Yeah, it wasn't like it went full on porn. It was just a couple of side boob shots.
Exactly, but I guess that's how freaking powerful Adrienne Barbeau's breasts were at the time. They're just out of control. They just were like governments were being like shut down. It was just like, we need to get this side boob out of here. It's just too much to handle for the public.
Well, it certainly, you know, hypnotized John Carpenter.
Yeah, well, I was gonna say it sure did. Aw, John Carpenter. I wonder if he was like, yeah, you should do this movie, and then he was like, you need to show that boob because it's all about the boob. There's so many photos of her just, you know,
cleavage shots and that.
Yeah, just doing her thing. She was like, you know what? I got the titties, and I think they're real, right?
I don't know.
I would love to ask her. I know you have your own podcast out there, Madame Barbeau. Are your breasts real? They're beautiful. So I'm gonna say that they are real, especially one of that side boob. I guess you can tell like when it's like implants from like side boob because of the droopage,
or the fact that they defy gravity.
Yeah, I guess that too. If they're like sticking way up in the air.
She's laying on her back, but they're standing up next to her. They're standing straight up. It's like, whoa, that seems odd.
What's your favorite thing about the movie? Because I have fond memories watching it, but I don't have any like back history like you do.
For me, it was just, like I said, it was one of the first it was one of the few superhero like comic adaptations at the time. And they actually did a few things. They did the great scene where he stops the car as it's coming by. He kind of slams his hands down the trunk and then just rips the door off and grabs the guy out. You didn't see a lot of that. Superman was it at the time. And even Superman, they didn't show him doing just a whole lot of super things because they didn't have the effects to back it up.
Yeah.
And it was good when the scene in the movie where he gets his arm chopped off, grows it back. The whole airboat chase where they're going around throwing the grenades and stuff at him, I liked that a lot in the movie. It was just good to see a lot of action, and then, like I said, you just didn't see anything other than Superman. I can't think of any other comic character that was on screen at the time back in the early 80s.
No, I can't really think about. I mean, we had kind of small screen, like we had the Incredible Hulk, and we had Wonder Woman. So, I mean, those were like small screen stuff. They hadn't really translated to be like a theatrical film.
And again, those two, even as a kid, I was like, when I watched the $6 Million Man, I was like, why is he running in slow motion if he's supposed to be running fast?
That's how fast he was running. They had to slow it down for you.
And then I was like, it was every episode, I gotta look at something with my bionic eye, and then I have to bend this with my bionic arm.
You know, he had to use what he got, man.
It did cost $6 million to build him.
Exactly. They had needed to utilize every body part every episode because it was costing them $6 billion.
No, $6 million.
Oh, $6 million. But in today's standard, it'd probably be $6 billion.
It'd probably be $6 billion, yeah.
Yeah.
But,
well, in the airboat ride, because I always try to look for in like certain films the Wilhelm scream.
Yeah.
And it is in this film when he throws one of the thugs out the airboat. you do hear it. I just love it so much. It just brings me so much joy.
Well, and the cast of this one was good too. Besides Adrian Barbeau, you had Ray Wise playing Alec Holland before he becomes Swamp Thing, and he's been in everything. I think for the last for the last 40 years. He even just recently showed up in Chilling Adventures of Sabrina, and he was originally supposed to play Swamp Thing in the costume. I've seen some pictures and heard him talk about online that they have a cast of his face as the Swamp Thing.
That's neat.
But the difference between him and the stuntman was so obvious that they ended up just having the stuntman play all the parts, which Dick Durock was the stuntman that did it, and he ended up playing Swamp Thing pretty much forever after this. He played it in the next movie and in the live-action TV series that they did.
Now, was there 2 live-action TV series, or just one? It was a 1990s one.
It was a 90s one, and it went for 3 seasons.
Wow. Well,
they were half-hour episodes. They ended up doing like 70 of them, I think.
It was like one of their, like that, I forgot the place where they had it. What was the
it was a USA network.
Oh, okay, that was like one of their highest rating shows for a while.
Yeah, it was like a half hour. It was only a half hour, and it's okay. It's not as good as obviously any of the comics, and they were on a much lower budget, so it was a lot more of just Swamp Thing kind of skulking around the swamp than it was anything else.
Yeah.
And they just reused the suit from the second movie, which I have to say, the suit is actually, in the original one, the suit's not bad. It looks kind of like what they were drawing the character like at the time. It was more of a slick, not a lot of plants sticking out on him or anything like that. It was more just like even in the comic, it looked kind of like it could be made into a suit very easily. And it wasn't until they did the Return of Swamp Thing in '89 that they made the suit he looked thicker in the chest. They like built up the musculature of it and put like the plants sticking out. Did a lot of that, but it made it look a lot more detailed, which was cool. And that's the suit that they reused in the TV show as well.
You know, you do see some of the discrepancies in the suit in the film, but it doesn't really take away too much because it's the shot. It's so done so rapidly that it doesn't linger on in the imperfection.
You can kind of see a couple times where the suit wrinkles as he's moving his arms, and you're like, oh, but at the same time, he's a plant, so maybe he wrinkled a little bit.
Maybe he does wrinkle a little bit. I mean, imagine you're just like all very swampy. You got all kinds of like vines and stuff. You're walking around. It's just, it's not gonna stay put together. It's not wood. He's not like a wood man.
Well, and too, I thought it was interesting that the comic series had actually been canceled for a while when the movie went into production, and they brought the comic back to tie into the movie because they wanted to have a comic going so people would buy that when the movie was a big hit, and then the movie wasn't really a big hit.
Do you own this comic?
I don't have the first ones of it. I have a lot of them starting from 21 on when Alan Moore took over, because the first 20 issues, or actually the first 19, were written by a different writer and artist. And it was in issue 20 that Alan Moore came in, who they had kind of given, carte blanche and said, do whatever you want to with the character. We don't care. It was supposed to be a movie tie-in. It's not working. Do what you want to do. So he wrapped up all 19 issues of storylines for the previous issues and issue number 20. And then starting with number 21, he started kind of everything over. It was kind of a whole little reboot on the character where you find out it wasn't just the fact that, that Alec Holland got the formula put on him. He ran out, jumped into the swamp, and became Swamp Thing. Alec Holland actually died when the formula went on him. He ceased to exist. And it was the formula charging the plants and animals around the little swamp that they absorbed his memories and became a new creature. They had his memories, but they were their own new creature. They even have the scene in the comic where the characters call him Alec, and he's like, no, I'm not Alec, and just walks away. So he kind of realized that, hey, I have this guy's memories, and I know, all of his things, but I am my own person now. And he took the series more, instead of having him trying to fight monsters or aliens every week, it went right into a lot more mystical things, which for a comic in the early 80s, they had a lot of really surprising scenes in the comic. I think it actually led to being one of the first comics that had the suggested for mature readers across it. Because while none of the ideas were really that like offensive, they were definitely different. When you have some of the ways they drew Swamp Thing, they had dealing with Swamp Thing's like how does he have sex with his human girlfriend. They were very discreet about it, but you got the idea of what was going on if you were old enough. If you were younger and read it, you were like, okay, that's weird.
Yeah, like that's like a whole new level. Actually, there's like a group of people that current like modern day like marry and have sex with like trees and plants.
Yeah, I've seen that.
That's insane. What are you thinking out there? Like, how would you even like shove that in there? That just seems very uncomfortable.
Yeah. And also, they kind of took the scene from the comic where
He just glazed right over that.
I'm gonna glaze right over the whole. We'll put that on the whiteboard with the evil molesting tree from Cabin in the Woods.
Fine, we'll put it on the whiteboard. Next.
In the Return of Swamp Thing, which came out 7 years later, apparently because the comic had gotten so popular again, someone said, "Hey, we still have the rights to that. Let's see if we could make another version of it. And this time, let's get the guy who did Chopping Mall to direct it because he's another horror guy. Well, people like that." And they went in a very heavy comedic route with it. They had Heather Locklear in it playing a plant store owner who loves plants but can't find the right man for her.
Oh, she loves those plants though.
Yeah, so of course Swamp Thing is the perfect man for her. And they even did a little bit of a ripoff of the issue where Swamp Thing has to show his girlfriend how they're going to have sex. They did that in this, which is weird because they basically ignore everything else that Alan Moore did, but they were like, oh, we got to put the sexy part in though. Because that's what people have been dying to see, is Swamp Thing have sex with this woman.
First of all, Heather Locklear. But wait a second. The first movie, like not to go like too far back, but I want to talk about like the guy that gets turned into like a pig man.
Yeah. That guy.
Yeah, because it does have some horror elements in it. I mean, I find it horrific that you would get turned into like a creature. It's kind of like they were like, you know what? Godzilla, that's way too big and like so done. Let's just like, I don't know, when they were like thinking of the comic, like what the hell was he thinking? Like Alan Moore, like.
Well, the pig guy had nothing to do with the Alan Moore stuff.
No, I know, but I mean, in itself, just to have the thought of, I'm gonna have this man become like a plant, or a plant that's going around that's thinking for itself.
That thinks it's a man. Well, Alan Moore is on a whole nother level than the rest of us. He exists on a completely different plane.
I've seen him and heard him talk a bit. He is very out there. It's like, what are you smoking, my friend?
He's the good stuff. That's what he has.
He has the Swamp Thing stuff.
He's got Swamp Thing level of weed. That's what he's got.
That's why he's like, that's how I came up with this. I really like this weed. It was really good. It started talking to me one day, and I'm like, you know what? That'd be a fucking amazing comic. Like, imagine a plant walking around talking.
Well, he's one of those guys that if they were like, here, would you like to write an issue of Superman? He's like, all right. And he writes like one of the weirdest Superman stories you'll ever read. But it's amazing. You're like, why doesn't he do this all the time? And they actually got him when they were like, hey, we're going to cancel the old Superman series. Do you want to tie up like 50 years worth of loose ends in the stories? Could you do it in 2 issues? And he said, yeah, okay, sure. He tied up 50 years worth of loose Superman stories in 2 issues. Just did a bunch of flashbacks, flash forwards to show everything. And it's still one of the most popular issues of Superman to this day.
That's wild.
And there was one where they did a Superman Swamp Thing crossover that he wrote that was where there's a plant that had, like from Krypton, that it's on a meteor, I believe, that Superman gets infected with, and it starts causing him to lose his powers. And they show him like completely freaking out because he gets a paper cut.
Wow.
And he's never had one before, and he's completely, traumatized by the paper cut. And I'm like, come on, Clark, it's just a paper cut. He's like, I don't understand. And he ends up in the swamp with Swamp Thing helping him to remove, since he can control plant life, he's removing the infection from him, which is the plant spores.
So, Return to Swamp Thing.
Yes.
Since we kind of like glazed over the first Swamp Thing, we're melding into now the Heather Locklear. Uh, what's I guess she was popular in that T.J. Hooker show.
She was popular in that, and then I'm not sure what. I think it was a couple of years before Melrose Place came on.
Yeah, it was a couple of years, like more than a couple of years.
But she was very popular in that, and they even make a reference to it in the show where she's leaving the plant shop, and she's like, "Oh, make sure to put on TJ what's his name for him. They really like that show."
Yeah, and then the whole Molly Crew thing later on.
Yeah, they have one of the guards where the two of the guards are comparing scars, and the one pulls down her shirt and shows
Points.
it. Yeah, pulls down her shirt and shows the bite mark on it. And goes Motley Crue's last tour.
Yeah, and it's just like, really, guys? Is this why you really? I mean, yeah, she was a looker, I guess. Therefore, if you like that kind of thing, she was a very. You'd see a lot of girls in Playboy that were very reminiscent to her. Was she in Playboy? I'm sure she was.
I think so. Yeah.
Yeah, you can totally see that.
But
I
at the
guess
same time, she's not really a good actress.
Hugh loves it. Hugh loves his blondes. Yeah, she wasn't a very good actress. I think she got better, or maybe it's because it was like Melrose Place and it was like hokey to begin with. I feel like she's like a fine wine. She like gets better with age, but
Well,
it's
and
not an Academy Award winning like performance at all.
no, and if it's part of it too is just a strange thing. They have the weird tone to it. We're like, oh, you're being held prisoner in a mansion, and you want to make, snappy little quips to the guards, and oh, the guard's gonna take you down in the basement and rape you, and you're like, oh, I don't want to do that. That seems a little odd. I think I'd be a little more upset about it than that.
Yeah, she's very nonchalant about the whole thing, and it's like you're going over to like receive this closure by your stepfather, and also, even though this is not the like main reason why you went, because she kind of glazed over the fact like that she wanted to know what really happened to her mom, and because her death was so sudden, and she didn't even get invited to the whatchamacallit funeral. She was telling the therapist, and she was like, she wanted closure. She was gonna go face to face, and then when she gets he's like, "Oh, so welcoming," and like, "Come into my mansion." She's like, "Okay." Like, if that was so pressing, that would have been the first thing I would have said when I got out of the car.
And someone you haven't seen for years and years, when you kind of meet him in a neutral location, let's go to their creepy house in the swamp and talk to him.
Yeah, who the hell lives in the freaking swamp? I mean, I recant that. I'm sure there's a lot of you guys that may be living in a swampy area. But, I mean, just like this house, though, it's just so intently creepy.
Yeah, it's like an old plantation looking.
Yeah, and then you got like all these guards, and it's just not the way to live. It's not a good. I think, don't they have one of those? They have like airboats. It's intense.
Yeah, you gotta have lots of airboats in the swamp. But what's funny is in both movies, you know, they don't really acknowledge the events of the first one in this second movie. It's another one of the ones where they kind of did a reboot and just said, oh, let's just, because they don't acknowledge anything that happened like with Adrienne Barbeau. They kind of have a repeat of the same little kid character from the first one. They find a kid that looked like him.
Yeah, it's like Evil Dead and Evil Dead 2.
Yeah. And ironically, they always have, they have Arcane always be the one responsible for his death that causes this kind of thing. And then that wasn't the case in the comics. He didn't meet Arcane until much later.
Was he a bad guy?
He was a bad guy. And he was Abigail Arcane Cable's father. Which Abigail was, or Abby, was his main love interest throughout the comics. But Arcane was actually, like I said, he didn't come in until much later in the comics. And then he was kind of definitively dealt with early on. And after about issue 30 or so of Swamp Thing, they really don't talk about him anymore. But they make out like he's the Lex Luthor of the series, because I think that's as far as they read a lot of them. We're like, oh, okay, he's fighting this guy. Cool, he's a weird monster guy. He's got lots of weird creatures around him.
Who else, like if you were making the movie, who would you have chosen to have been like the first villain?
The first villains were really just kind of, people where they caused him to get smashed into it. So I can kind of see why they would put Arcane with it, because Arcane always had lots of like weird creatures. They called them the Unmen, where it was like Frankenstein type things. because a lot of the original artwork was done by Bernie Wrightson, who did like some adaptations of Frankenstein and all that, and he had a very unique art style that lent itself to these kind of like stitched together creatures, or Swamp Thing, all that kind of stuff. It was easy to see where they got him for it. But I don't know who you would put with him other than that. But it's just odd that they picked that. It's kind of like in the Superman, they just bring back Luthor over and over again in all the movies. It's always Luthor.
Yeah, it is. And it's just like there's other people out there.
There's other villains out there. It's always Luthor or the three from Krypton. That's it. That's all they know. Create your own villain. Do something original on there.
Why couldn't it have been like Swamp Thing meets the creature from the Black Lagoon? I feel like maybe he's crossing like lakes and shit, and they just come across one another and they become like best friends.
They could.
And then they fight the humanoid from the deep.
Ooh, those guys. They were a little extra rapey.
Yeah, but they're only going for the two. I mean, as long as Adrian Barbeau and Heather Locklear are out of the way, they're not gonna like be fucking Swamp Thing and the creature from the Black Lagoon. They're into ladies with titties.
They're just gonna be hanging out talking about all their women.
Yeah, they're like, I get more snatched than you, and they're both looking like, yeah, that's true. I only got one chick that I put over my shoulder. Swamp Thing's like, Swamp Thing has actually 2 snatches. I mean, I guess technically he didn't have sex with Adrian Barbeau that we know of.
No.
Heather Locklear, yeah, they did it, and because she's really into plants, and so Humanoid from the Deep takes it for like 5 or 6 women that we know of, and a child. He bore a child. I don't think Swamp Thing is bearing any children.
He did.
Wow, he was busy too. He just plucked a flower off his thing and like threw it, and it was like,
no,
rise, my child.
No, as the series went on, you found out more about his powers. Since he can control plant life, and there is flora in your intestinal tract, he would use that to can actually kill people. He would take over the flora in their intestinal tract and cause it to grow and just rip out of their body and kill them. And then he also used that to be able to move into John Constantine's body and take over his body and use it to have sex with Abby so that they could have a child.
Whoa. John Constantine, I feel like he's in like everything. Is it? I mean, what is he about? I mean, I know this is not a John Constantine section of the part of the podcast, but elaborate.
Alan Moore and the Stephen Bissett and John, I think I'm not sure exactly how you say it, Totalman. They created him, and they originally modeled him after Sting. They drew him to look like Sting.
Okay.
And they needed a character that would kind of come in and explain some of the magical elements that were going on to Swamp Thing, so they created him. And throughout, issue, I'm not sure what issue he first pops up in, but there's about a 1.5 year long arc of Swamp Thing where Constantine pops in and out of it all the time.
Yeah, he's popping in and out. Is it issue 69?
No. I see what you did there. And then the character proved so popular they gave him his own series in like 88. He got his own series. And then it was one of those things where in the 80s, early 90s, they started the Vertigo line of comics.
Oh, yeah.
Where they kind of isolated all the characters from the other people in the DC universe. Constantine didn't really interact with Superman or any of them that much. It was his own thing. Swamp Thing was in that where he did his thing, didn't interact with the rest of the universe very much. Sandman, did a little bit in the beginning, but they just kind of kept them in their own little pocket and didn't have them interacting all the time. And for a long time, they were just out of the whole mainstream. It wasn't until maybe 6-7 years ago they kind of brought them all back in and said, okay, now Constantine's going to go help Superman.
Heather Locklear dies in this one.
Yeah.
She gets, Adrian Barbeau didn't have, her titties kept her alive. She didn't have to go through death, but Heather Locklear did.
He was close to death. He healed her.
Yeah, but he brought this other woman back from the dead. How appropriate, because it is, for those who do celebrate, it is Easter Sunday this Sunday, so Swamp Thing is, performing, godly miracles.
Yes, he's pulling all kinds of miracles out of his little swampy butt.
Swampy Butt, that's my new band name.
They also did there was a 5 or 6 episodes of an animated TV series of Swamp Thing that they did to tie in with a whole line of toys that they made.
Of course.
And they made the toys before they even knew if the cartoon was going to be a success or not. They had it ready to go. They had a whole line of figures. They had like a Swamp Thing that shoots his hand out. You squeeze his legs, it retracts his hand because he does that so much. And they had little swamp buggies, little monster people. Um, the cartoons, early 90s cartoon, so
Yeah.
they put a kind of a whole like eco message into it. It was kind of a little bit, they were trying to rip off Captain Planet a little bit.
I was gonna say Captain Planet.
And it's not very good. The toys were kind of weird too. They were made by Kenner that did all the Star Wars toys.
Oh.
So a lot of the things were recycled Star Wars.
I was gonna say, was it like a Gorgon, like as Swamp Thing?
I'm sorry, it's what?
I think I named the guy wrong. I'm sorry. The Gorn. Is it a Gorn as Swamp Thing?
No, that was Star Trek. Kenner did Star Wars.
Oh, I could have sworn you said Star Trek.
No, Kenner did all the Star Wars.
Okay, was it Chewbacca as Swamp Thing?
No, but I'm sure a lot of the people were probably pretty close. A lot of the vehicles and like a couple of the play sets were recycled Star Wars play sets.
Okay.
They were notorious for doing that. They did it with Robin Hood, Prince of Thieves. They released the action set for that. The Robin Hood's treehouse was the Ewok village.
Oh my!
From Return of the Jedi, they just painted it slightly differently and said, "Now it's Robin Hood's treehouse."
Shameless. And why the hell would they make toys for that movie? That movie is an adult film. It is just. Some people say it's terrible. I have very fond memories of it.
But yeah, I don't. That was the time when they would make a toy for anything. I mean, look, they were going to make toys for Conan the Barbarian, and it was a hard R movie. No one thought to check that before they committed to make the toys, and they were like, oh, yeah. I don't think people are going to want their kids to play with the Conan toy, especially when they can't see the movie.
This film, The Return of Swamp Thing, has like, at the beginning, they're like fighting, I want to say they're fighting the Fly, but it's not.
It's the Leech Man, they call it.
Leech Man.
I will give them the makeup effects in this. I forgot to look and see who they were by, but the practical makeup effects in this are all pretty good. All the monsters that he fights are pretty amazing. There's a leech guy. There's like an insect creature that has like an arm kind of growing out of one of its eyes. It's super creepy. There's like an elephant one that's like the Elephant Man, but it's like half of his head is an elephant, half of it's human. They did really good work on that, and it's a shame that the effects in this movie are better than the original Swamp Thing, but the story and acting and everything else is way inferior to the original one.
Yeah, well, I guess, it was 7 years after the fact, so it just got like a little better. With the whole special effects. And it did. The suit looked a hell of a lot better. And it had like more like hangy stuff on it. More swampy,
kind of
more
sticking out.
vines.
It looked like it was kind of wet all the time. It looked moist.
Yeah, it was moist. I don't know. I like both films. I have I have a clear memory of the second one, because I feel like they rerun that more than the first one.
Yeah, I can see where it would be a little cheaper to run than, because once Nightmare on Elm Street hit, Wes Craven's back catalog was going to be a little more expensive. Whereas Jim Wynorski, when Chopping Mall is your claim to fame, that's not gonna help you out any of the finance department, really.
Definitely not. Neil Cuthbert co-wrote the first one. And he also did Hocus Pocus.
Oh, wow.
So there's like, I guess he really likes like magical connections.
Yeah.
I don't know. I'm really torn. I mean, when we saw the DVD, it looked really good. The Blu-ray, I'm sorry. The Blu-ray looked really good.
Yeah, both Blu-rays of the original, and they're both, one's from Shout Factory and the other one is from, I'm not sure who put the second one out. But they both look amazing. They've cleaned them up so you're watching the movie for the first time. So they're so clear.
Yeah. I was going to like break out into song and like sing the Madonna like first time, but it wasn't going to work out. So I'm going to save that for another day.
Sadly, they don't have any commentary from Wes Craven on the original Swamp Thing. That would have been interesting to hear, but I don't think he had a lot of fond memories of it, probably.
I don't even. I mean, why do you think he wouldn't? Is there like behind the scenes stuff that has him saying anything negative about his experience, or
Probably just, I think a lot of these people, they don't want to revisit ones that were kind of commercial failures, you know?
yeah? I mean, then you would later on to go like Nightmare on Elm Street and boom, make like a big name for yourself, and
Yeah,
then
plus he doesn't need to talk about Swamp Thing because he's got plenty of other things to talk about, you know?
he's like, ah, that old movie I did from the '80s. I have no idea anything about that Swamp Thing.
But there's a lot of special features on both where they interview different members of the cast. They show the kid from in the original Swamp Thing. They show the kid that was there grown up. It's interesting to hear him talk about it. He didn't seem to do a whole lot of acting, but you know he remembers it fondly.
Yeah, I can imagine like when you're a kid and you're like on this big production and everyone's like doing something and running around and you have like a little hand in that, how cool it must be to like live in a comic book.
Yeah, and to be able to pull it up and go, "Hey, I was in this."
Yeah, like, hey, look what daddy did for like 5 seconds, you know. Well, that's really neat.
And of course, the day that we're recording this, they have just released a quick teaser image of the new Swamp Thing that's going to be coming onto the like DC Universe like online platform that's going to be out, and it's there's a lot of good people in the cast. Derek Mears that played Jason in the Friday the 13th reboot from 2009 is going to be playing Swamp Thing, and I like him a lot. He'll be good at that, and there's quite a few other people in the cast that seem to be pretty decent, and hopefully it'll do well. I know that the big thing today was they were talking about they had cut the order of episodes down from 13 to 10. But that could just be budget reasons because I know the suit is all practical. They're not doing any CGI on the suit unless it's just to clean up seams or any of that. The whole suit will be an actual physical suit. Because I think that's important because it's hard to like in the Green Lantern movie where they had his whole suit be CGI.
It looks so fake.
It was so weird to
Yeah.
see it interact with. They'd have been better off if they had just done like maybe the symbol a little CGI on it to make it a little glowy or
Yeah, how they did for like Iron Man.
yeah, do it like that. But for the whole suit, it looked like they were talking to a cartoon the whole time.
Yeah, definitely.
And I don't think you could pull off Swamp Thing with a CGI suit because the guy wouldn't be moving right. You need to have him have that weight on him to be walking around and to feel it and to know how to, because you're not going to be able to turn your head the same way you would when you've got like a big bulky neck.
Yeah, he's a plant man. So
Yeah, you can't CGI the plants on him.
yeah, definitely not. It would look terrible. So I'm glad that it is practical effects and also it gives work to those people that are just like so good at that because it's like a dying art.
Yeah, now it's like, hey, just drop me a monster on the computer, it'll be fine.
Yeah, which is terrible because it looks bad. So
Every
stop.
time.
The good, combine it. You can have practical and CGI in the best, and that's what makes it look more realistic because you have the both of best worlds, the best of both worlds.
There you go.
Wow, I'll say that like 5 times.
But yeah, it's great if they do it like to clean up some of the seams or the wrinkles. Like if they could have applied the CGI to the original Swamp Thing and cleaned up where you see the suit wrinkle like that, remove a little bit of that. Okay, that's fine.
Yeah.
I have a problem or removing wires from people. It's like when they show that Mad Max Fury Road, and it's still insane where the people are jumping from car to car, but they just remove like the safety wire on them.
Yeah.
Like to me, that's what you use the digital effects for.
Exactly.
Remove the safety wires. That way, no one has to die or get hurt, but you can just take that wire out, and then it looks like even more insane than what it already was.
Yeah. Well, I thought that you were going to be way more nerdy than you were talking about the Swamp Thing because I know that you're like all about it, but you kept it even at like a level 5 out of 10.
Well, I didn't want to jump all the way to 11 on the nerdery.
I don't know. I think it would have been acceptable because, you are well versed in the Swamp Thing world. So you can discuss it a lot. If they were to do, I'm looking forward to. I probably won't because everyone wants their own fucking streaming channel now, so that's annoying.
Ugh.
But it'd be.
I
really
feel like
cool.
this happened in the 80s, 90s, where there was a channel for everything: the Sci-Fi Channel, the Mystery Channel, the Romance Channel, Everything Channel. And then everybody was like, can we just have a couple of channels that just show a variety of everything?
I would like to see the Swamp Thing though. The teaser trailer, I thought it was animated because it did look very fake. But I'm interested to see where they're gonna take it and what kind of monsters they're gonna have. Like, what's gonna be the main plot? Is it gonna be like, I mean, it's not gonna be like Swamp Thing like mixed with like CSI, right? That would be weird.
No, they're not gonna do that. I'm trying to remember the name. I just saw someone was going to be in it. That they're bringing some of the characters from the comic. I think they're going to go the more Alan Moore route because I know they have someone in there playing Jason Woodrue, who is the guy that figures out that Swamp Thing in Alan Moore's version that he's not an actual person, that
He's a
just
plant.
a plant. And he was like a throwaway villain from the 60s in Batman, like called the Floronic Man, that could control plants, and he was partially a plant himself. And Alan Moore was great at taking these characters that no one gave a shit about and just throwing them in and making them like really evil villains or really interesting characters. He brought back, now here's goes with the nerdery. He brought back, like, from the 70s, the character, the demon that Jack Kirby created, where it's like a medieval demon that speaks in rhymes, who's like bonded to a character named Jason Blood.
Wow.
And
Your brother, your long lost brother.
he's a human that turns into Etrigan the demon, who only speaks in rhyme. He brought back like characters like the Phantom Stranger, the Spectre, the character Dead Man, who is literally a ghost that takes over people's bodies. He brought back all these like forgotten mystical characters from the 60s and 70s and put them all in there and made them cool.
I'm gonna tell you, I don't know why someone was in the fucking storyboard room like, you know what, let's call this character Dead Man, because that's original. And
He
then,
has a giant D on his uniform.
oh
too.
no, he does not. And
Yes,
then
he does. He was a trapeze artist with a big D on there for like a dead man because he was always doing these death-defying stunts. And then someone shot him in the middle of a trapeze act, and he became a spirit that goes around and possesses people's body and solves mysteries. Because that's what you did in the 60s and 70s.
you solve mysteries, man. It's like Nancy Drew and the Hardy Boys. You got to get down and dirty. It's like Scooby Doo all over the place. There is a lot of solving mystery things as a kid, like kid shows where you're solving mysteries. That's
Yeah,
kind of
all
weird.
the kids got together and solved mysteries. That was it.
Yeah, well, I guess that's what they did back in the day. What do you foresee if you had to take a good guess on who would either be the main villain or what direction they're gonna go? Well, you may have read up on that. I haven't seen anything
They
about
haven't
it.
really put out a whole lot about it. I know they're going to have Arcane in it. And
Wow, shocker!
yeah, they'll probably go a more mystical version with it because the comics, the later comics like Alan Moore, and that Arcane was more of a mystical villain than he was like a scientist trying to create things. He was more of a back from the dead. There's even I believe in one of the issues where he kind of shows himself as a fly that takes over a guy's body.
Wow,
And
that would be cool to see on screen. Like if they were able to do that, I'm sure they would if they really wanted to. Well, if you have nothing else to say about Swamp Thing and the return of Swamp Thing, I guess this is the end of our podcast.
this is the end of the swamp here.
Yeah, end of the swamp. I was trying to come up with something really clever, like
Oh,
pun
the other
or-
thing I will say about Swamp Thing before we go is, while the second movie, Return of Swamp Thing, is not my favorite, the opening is amazing.
The opening is amazing.
Where
It's
they cut
pretty
together
dope.
all the great scenes from the comic, the covers, and put it to Creedence Clearwater Revival's Born on the Bayou.
Yeah, born on the bayou. Yeah.
Which really, the song has nothing to do with Swamp Thing, but it's just he's in the bayou, so it's perfect. They put in a lot of the Alan Moore covers. They even show the one where he's got the Green Lantern ring on. He has mouths for eyes. It's very cool.
Yeah, that actually is really, really neat. I was just actually thinking about Mausoleum with the demon titties when you
Yeah.
just said that.
That was kind of a theme in comics. They did a whole character in the Sandman called the Corinthian that had mouths for eyes too.
Interesting. Now I guess maybe we know where like Guillermo del Toro got his inspiration for Pan's Labyrinth, because didn't he have like he had like mouths in the palms of his hand?
His
and-
eyes in the palms of his
Yeah,
hands.
yeah, and his eyes were like slit open.
Yeah.
Creepy. All right. Well, thank you so much for joining in on this week's podcast. And, find us on all platforms as the Orlando Horror Society. If you like the Jump Scare podcast, please Make sure to leave us a review and or a rating on iTunes. We're also on YouTube and Podbean.
Yep, give us a rating there and let us know what you think. And if there's a particular movie or subject you'd like us to talk about at some point, let us know. And if we will look forward to hearing from you.
Stay tuned to the horror.
And now, folks, it's time to say goodnight. We sincerely appreciate your patronage and hope we've succeeded in bringing you an enjoyable evening of entertainment. Please drive home carefully and come back again soon. Good night.